Well, I'm Greg Lucas, the state librarian. For those of you who haven't come to the state library before, welcome. I wanted to bring our speakers here to Sacramento because I saw two of them, Luis and Miko, at a Library Association convention last fall. And what I liked about it was there was a sort of no-nonsense, here's what the situation is, presentation of where we are on immigration law in California, where we are nationally, and then that dovetailed with practical, community-based solutions on how we meet those challenges. So it's about, I would say, it's fair to say, it's the antithesis of what we're hearing in the national, at least political debate over immigration. And I thought it was valuable because one of the things I'm learning, I'm sort of new to government. It'll be 2 years I've been in this job on May 1st. One of the things that has been really golden for me is to go visit local public libraries and see the programs that not just libraries, but that communities are doing. So I mean, all the time people will call and say, hey, Greg, you know, we can solve this problem for you for $20 million. And yet, I mean, you'll hear from Miko later, but I mean, she came up with a terrific thing that could be replicated in every library in California, and she got a lousy, what was it, $5,000? Something like that, right. And so, I mean, I think it speaks to some of the creativity of librarians, and I think it also speaks to how extraordinary libraries are in terms of adapting to what their community is. So, enough about me. Who are you? Well, Marlon, so here, you come up and introduce yourself. So, our co-host is the California Endowment. And so you're going to tell us how awesome they are, right?
Yep, I'll tell you a little bit about it, but it's really about, but actually what I appreciated your comments, Greg, in the morning about, you know, what you can do with a small amount of money, because I think the endowment, you know, we are known, we have this, you know, we're a large foundation, right? And I'll explain more in a little bit, but really our focus, and what we've seen the greatest impact has been when we've been able to invest in communities. And it could be small amounts of dollars, not huge amounts of money, but it's really been about the passion of community where we've seen the biggest difference. So again, my name is Marlon Cuellar. I'm a program manager at the California Endowment. Been there about 5 years now, previously worked in the state legislature. And I've always had a passion for healthcare policy and for helping communities. So that's what's always driven me, and that's what drives me and my work here at the Endowment. But for those of you that don't know, I'll just explain briefly what the California Endowment is. It's a private health foundation. We really have a mission to expand healthcare to all Californians and really improve the health status of everyone. And I underlined all Californians because for all of us, that means everybody, regardless of, you know, of your background, how you look, what your immigration status is. And so that's really driven our work here at the Endowment. We believe in empowering people and empowering communities, especially young people. We know they're the future and important to develop our future leaders. We believe healthcare is a human right, and we believe that in health and justice for all. So you'll see a lot of communications and taglines relating to that special messaging that we embody. Our headquarters are based in Los Angeles. We have an office in Oakland and in Fresno and in San Diego, but our work is really driven by the 14 communities that you see up here. And you'll see we reach all the way from what's called Del Norte. I always say Del Norte, but Del Norte is how it's commonly said. All the way to Fresno and City Heights and San Diego. The endowment created a 10-year Building Healthy Communities initiative where we specifically decided to invest in these 14 communities, a total of about $1 billion over 10 years. And we're really in the middle of that initiative right now. It's a 5-year of that 10-year initiative, and it's pretty incredible, the results that we've seen in communities, how they've helped to really drive changes using a wide variety of methods to really improve their communities. And what do we mean by, you know, what are the types of changes and what are the types of changes that we've seen in communities? The way to kind of explain kind of the team that I work on, which is the prevention team that's on here, So the endowment on the statewide level has 3 teams that really work on different areas, schools, neighborhoods, and health. And my expertise and background in the Affordable Care Act has really allowed me to do much work around healthcare services, or what's called the prevention team. So that's why you'll see, this week the endowment. Actually, tomorrow we have what's called an Awa for All event, where we're raising awareness about the importance of water in the community. So that falls under kind of our neighborhoods work there. You'll also see we love hashtags at the endowment. Social media. I see Chucha there. We love spreading awareness through what we call different sub campaigns. One of my personal favorites is Soda Kills. You'll see that. The importance of raising awareness of sugar-sweetened beverages and how damaging they are and contribute to diabetes. But the top 2 that I want to underscore are Health for All and Health for All Kids, and I'll get to those in a moment. So the California Endowment and what we call the DACA and DAPA, you'll hear more about that. But with regards to deferred actions, the reason why the endowment cares so much about the deferred action programs and their impacts that they'll have in allowing immigrants to be able to not only get legal recognition, but be able to be eligible for healthcare programs such as Medi-Cal. Currently, those that are in the Deferred Action Program, what we call Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, are eligible for Medi-Cal if their income is low enough. Pending DAPA, we'll hear more about that. Depending on with the Supreme Court, with DACA recipients will be eligible for Medi-Cal in California as well. California has a legal infrastructure that allows us to be able to cover those recipients under Medi-Cal. But in general, we know that folks that are able to enroll in deferred action will be able to get work permits and more than likely be able to qualify for programs such as employer-sponsored health insurance, which is really important. So that's kind of led our efforts here in California, being that we've been ahead of the curve in looking at how do we provide healthcare coverage to our undocumented children. The endowment has helped to disseminate a lot of information with regards to the ongoing opportunities to get healthcare coverage. We know May 1st, a lot of undocumented children will be able to be eligible for Medi-Cal, and so we've been able to create a lot of information for folks to know and get ready for those opportunities. Some resources where we develop resources not only for the community at large, but also for those providers, those people that are doing the enrollment, the day-to-day, to be able to help people enroll into healthcare coverage. So that's a big part of where we see, where we're able to leverage our resources and our dollars is in helping to disseminate information broadly. Also being able to help, like we said, communities on the ground that have been able to work to sustain their local level healthcare, county healthcare programs. We've seen a lot of mobilization of our communities that have really taken an active and passionate effort to really protect their services at the local level. So it's been really exciting for us this past year, both at the local level and at the statewide level. The Pope was recently in Mexico, as you know, and so we've had messaging around looking at opportunities and figures to help create that awareness of the importance of the immigrant population to our state. And finally, the real important work that we like to do and that we feel really embodies everything that the endowment does, is lifting up the power of young people themselves, lifting up, they've lived through the situations, they know they're the best storytellers, and they're the most effective advocates that we have and that we know. And so the power of the voices themselves of the folks that are both eligible for these type of programs or are left out of these programs are the important voices that we care about. So we have a whole ways to get involved or learn more about our Health for All campaign. I just realized we're on something called Snapchat now and all these things. It's kind of scary for me, but so the endowment is in a wide variety of mediums. If you would like to get to know more information, or if you have any follow-up questions for me, you can either ask them now or feel free to follow up with me. We're always happy to provide information about what we do and how we do it. So thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luis Guerra. I'm here with the United Farm Workers Foundation. Our mission at the United Farm Workers Foundation is to open the doors of opportunity for working people in their communities. We really envision a clear path to social integration and civic participation for immigrants and their children. So this topic of immigration and where it unites with health is a huge topic for us. Particularly our service centers are in very heavy agricultural areas, and we see immigration status as a social determinant of health. Like if you don't have immigration status, your health is gonna suffer. Whether it be directly because your stress level is high, or anxiety, or indirectly because you just don't have access to benefits and services. So that being said, my goal in the next section of today's discussion is to catch you up to speed on what's going on in the immigration world, and talk to you about why that matters in California, and then talk a little bit about what strategies are being used to get ready for large-scale immigration programs that could help over 5 million undocumented individuals across the nation. No one has ever encountered a situation like the one that we're anticipating, so there's a lot of great work happening that I hope to share with you today on the implementation efforts. And then I'll make sure to end it with why are we here in this gorgeous building with the California State Library? It's because it's going to require more than your typical players. It can't just continue to be immigration legal service providers in order to spread the word and help people. It's gonna require a top-down strategy as well as a grassroots strategy. So just giving a quick recap, immigration reform, CIR, comprehensive immigration reform, has been for over a decade been pushed at a federal level. It has stalled. There has been recent efforts where we as immigration advocates had some momentum to actually move legislation with a pathway to citizenship, but all in all, we haven't been successful. Like many other efforts have stalled in DC, but we continue to advocate that there needs to be some sort of solution for estimated 11 million undocumented individuals that are in our communities. And that number is nationwide. So that being said, the Obama administration created what we call administrative relief. It's also an executive action, so you'll hear me use terms throughout my presentation. If I refer to the administrative relief programs, I'm talking about the programs that he created through executive action or executive order. On June 15, 2012, he created the program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The acronym that's used for that program is called DACA. And most people know this particular program. I'll go into the eligibility requirements, but it targets, typically younger folks. Their common term that's used to describe them are dreamers. That's because a lot of the eligibility criteria that was used to craft this executive order came from a piece of legislation called the DREAM Act. A lot of people call it the DREAM Act, and we have to educate our communities that no, this is not legislation. It does not provide a pathway to citizenship. And we still want the DREAM Act to pass through Congress and be signed into law, but it's not the DREAM Act. It does benefit a lot of dreamers, however, so you'll hear in the community, you'll hear it called the DREAM Act. On November 20th, 2014, more recently, President Obama, since he saw that CIR wasn't gonna happen, his term as president is ending, he noticed there's a lot of people that got left out of the original DACA program, so he expanded that criteria to include more people. We call that expanded DACA. I'll also go over the criteria for that. And then the big program where we're expecting millions of people, most of the people to qualify, is called the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, commonly referred as DAPA. So for that program, we estimate 5 million, actually for combined expanded DACA and Deferred Action for Parents Americans. We estimate that over 5 million undocumented individuals could benefit across the nation once those programs are implemented. These programs are currently in the Supreme Court of the United States, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happening with that. So Texas and 25 other states filed a lawsuit challenging the DAPA and expanded DACA programs. On February 2015, a federal district court put DAPA and expanded DACA on hold. We were actually just one day away from going out into our communities and having individuals benefit from expanded DACA, but unfortunately we weren't able to do so. So on November 9th, 2015, a divided panel on the Fifth Circuit issued a decision that affirmed the federal district's court order and continued to block the programs. So most recently, the Supreme Court took the case, which we're very excited about as immigration advocates. We do believe that the president acted under his power and didn't. The main arguments are two: one, that he extended his powers, he overreached, and two, that the states the 26 states that are filing the lawsuit are saying that the costs are going to outweigh the benefits, so that this is going to be a costly program due to giving out driver's license or auxiliary services. So we are still moving forward. We can't wait for the Supreme Court to make up its mind and then start preparing for it. Like I said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime maybe opportunity for many of us to help our communities, so we're continuing to prepare and implement. It's important to note that everything that's happening in the Supreme Court does not affect the initial DACA program that started in 2012. So there's a lot of confusion in our communities. Every time this gets brought up, Univision is one of the main sources of information for our Latino communities, a Spanish television station. And every time there's, anytime immigration comes up in the news, our phones just go off the wall. Like we plan out for these types of things. And I know this is the case for a lot of organizations that work with the immigrant community. I want to take a little bit of a step back. So now that we have a context of where we're at, so the administrative relief programs, I just want to highlight their deferred action programs. So they're deferring deportation. That's essentially what they're doing there. So an immigrant's coming forward, if they have this certain criteria, they submit an application, and they're telling the government, I'm here, I meet this criteria, here's my evidence, please don't deport me. That's essentially all that's happening in the process, and the benefit is that they get a social security number and a work authorization. So a lot of people are willing to take that risk, and quote unquote, coming out of the shadows and get access to work authorization. Once again, the existing program is called DACA, and the new proposed programs are DAPA and expanded DACA. So a little bit about numbers, what this means to California. California is going to be the state with the largest number of beneficiaries. So if we use, on the chart right here, you see the numbers broken down. If we just count the original DACAs at 343,000, expanded DACA would give us an additional 93,000 individuals, and DAPA is over 1 million individuals. So all these three programs together, we're talking about 1.5 million individuals that could potentially get relief from deportation and be further integrated into our communities. This number gives us 50% of the undocumented estimated population in California, we hope will be eligible for any of these deferred action programs. Just to break down the estimates on the undocumented population in California, up here you have the top 5 communities based by top countries of birth. I would like to point out, everyone always assumes that Mexico is the first one, rightly so, it is. But one challenge that we're gonna have with these programs is there's a huge diversity of immigrant communities. I mean, these are just the top countries, but once you go past underneath China, I mean, they're all about the same. And you're talking about, different languages. They might be from the same country, but even within Mexico, we have our own challenges because a lot of these numbers aren't going to include indigenous communities that Spanish might not be their first language. So I'll talk a little bit more about challenges in a sec, but just to keep that in mind. This diagram kind of breaks down the major regions, the numbers by the major regions. So on a nonprofit level, a lot of us have organized ourselves into a coalition called Ready California. Ready California's mission is to make California as prepared as possible for the implementation of these programs. So what you see, the color codes that you see up here on the chart, we divided up into these major regions. So we have the North Coast, the Bay Area, Central Coast, South Coast, LA, Orange County, San Diego Imperial, Inland Empire, Southern San Joaquin, Northern San Joaquin, and Northern Valley. This is really where most immigrants are going to be, that benefit for these programs will be found. Unfortunately, you'll see these gray areas. We just don't currently have the infrastructure. There's not a lot of services out here, and we're thinking of being creative, using technology, using mobile strategies to reach those communities. I would also like to point out, if you take the top 10 agricultural counties in California, just the top 10, and then you divide that from urban California. So let's imagine that there's urban California, that's a state by itself, so that would be all the major cities. And then there's rural California, and that becomes a state by itself. And then you put them in order comparing all the other 50 states. Rural California would be number 4 on that list. So you would have urban California, Texas, Illinois, and then you would have rural California. So that at the United Farm Workers Foundation, since we really focus a lot of our energy in rural communities and agricultural communities, we're doing everything that we can to find partners like libraries, unions, schools, whoever we can find, because we know we have a big challenge up ahead. So that's a fact that I always like to share with folks. So I'm just going to share some of the criteria with you. Don't feel overwhelmed with all these legal terms and requirements. There's a sign-in sheet that you just make sure you're signed up on that sheet that's being passed around, and we'll send you the slides. But just so you know, the initial DACA program that was announced on June 15, 2012, most of these programs have some similarities, but there's a few differences. So the main things to point out for the initial DACA program is that there's an age cap. So you have to have been under the age of 31 as of June 15, 2012, when President Obama made the announcement. You also have to prove that you came to the US before reaching your 16th birthday. So that really leaves out a lot of the older community that came after their 16th birthday. You have to prove that you've been continuously residing in the US since June 15, 2007. We'll talk a little bit about how the community proves these things. But essentially, we need to find evidence from June 15, 2007 up until today or whenever they file. A really hard one for our communities is they have to prove they were physically present in the US and out of status on the day of the announcement. So as advocates, we need to help them find something, ideally something with that date, June 15, 2012, or as close as possible to that date, because we have to prove they were here and they weren't in another country or left. Another big obstacle to this program that communities face is their is an education requirement. So they have to prove they were currently in school or have graduated from school, they obtained a GED, or have been honorably discharged from the military. So this is another thing that we continue to educate our communities. There's this conception that you have to be a college graduate. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of flexibility in that last requirement, as long as you can prove you're enrolled in some sort of education program to better your life. Some of these benefits I already stated. So they get protection from deportation for 2 years. They get work authorization for 2 years. In addition, they're going to get a social security number, and in some states, like in our great state of California, they'll be able to have access to a driver's license. But once again, it doesn't give them permanent immigration status. It doesn't give them a pathway to citizenship. It's more like, we like to refer it to as like a Band-Aid solution, but we'll take whatever we have right now and go with it, because it changes lives. So the DAPA program. So this is deferred action for parents of Americans and lawful permanent residents. So what that means is that they're gonna have to prove that they have at least one son or daughter who was a US citizen or a legal permanent resident. Legal permanent resident just means green card holder, who was born on or before November 20th, 2014. Once again, that date is important because that's the date that President Obama announced the program. They're gonna have to prove, once again, the continuous residence piece, that they've been living in the US since before January 1st, 2010. They're gonna have to prove that they were physically present in the US and out of status on the date that President Obama made the announcement. And like all immigration programs, they can't be convicted of certain crimes or engaged in certain illegal activity. We do know that application costs will be $465. There won't be a waiver fee. So we're educating our communities and helping them, working with community banks, trying to figure out right now different strategies to help come up with these 465s. If you can imagine, a lot of our, particularly in farm worker communities, a lot of our communities are very low income, and there might be multiple family members that will apply for this program, so that quickly can add up. The benefits for DAPA are very similar to DACA. The only difference is instead of 2 years, it's for 3 years. Both the protection from deportation and the work authorization. But once again, DAPA won't give a pathway to citizenship or provide permanent immigration status. Lastly, because there are going to be a significant number of individuals that will benefit from the expanded criteria to DACA, these are the main differences. So the upper age limit to apply will be eliminated once expanded DACA goes through. If you remember, initial DACA had that age cap of 31 as of June 15, 2012. The dates of continuous residence will be switched from January 1st, 2010, when it used to be June 15, 2007. So that's roughly about 2.5, 3 years that they no longer have to come up with evidence for. And then since DACA currently is only good for 2 years, it's going to be switched to be for 3 years. So we continue. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unscrupulous agents out in our communities that are just waiting for immigration to pop up in the news and take advantage of a lot of our community. So we continue to educate them to not be victims of fraud, and remind them that there's a lot they can do to continue to get prepared, but there's no application process yet. And we are highly encouraging them to go to a lot of our communities have never been legally screened. They just assume they don't qualify for something because they try to analyze their own case. But with the DACA program, there was a study done where actually roughly 15 to 20% of the individuals that came to a legal DACA screening, a lot of these young kids ended up benefiting for something better. and with a pathway to a green card and pathway to citizenship. So we're highly encouraging communities to just go get screened right now. What's the worst that can happen? We can tell you, you may not qualify for anything now, but you might qualify for something better, or you can continue to get prepared. There's a great program called the Board of Immigration Appeals Recognition and Accreditation Program that it's administered by the Department of Justice at a federal level that allows non-attorneys to practice immigration law. At the United Farm Workers Foundation, we're the largest, the acronym is BIA, we're the largest BIA recognized and accredited staff in California and second largest in the nation. And we're highly encouraging other partners to really think about if they want to provide immigration legal services or just general consultations. This is an opportunity for nonprofits or other organizations that don't have attorneys on staff to get the training required to go through the process to be able to do it legally. We continue to tell our community to get prepared and there's a lot of document gathering that they need to do. So once they're going to have to prove their identity. Unfortunately, there's a lot of issues here with some community members getting access to consular IDs. There may be errors in their birth certificate. So there's a lot of issues we can help them out through that right now. We're going to have to compile evidence that they were here in the U.S. since November 20th, 2014. So here's where we get creative. This may include library records, if the individual is a patron of the library. Anything that's an official document of any of the agencies they've interacted with that has their name and date and address is going to be helpful for us. So, the more official the document, the better. We're going to have to obviously prove that they have a son or daughter that's a U.S. citizen or permit legal resident, and then we're going to have to find proof that they were physically present on that date. So when we talk to agencies that may interface with immigrants but don't want to do the legal services route, there's a lot of help that they can do with the document collection side. So like I mentioned in the opening statement, we really see that the only way that we're going to be able to accomplish this is two-pronged. We need to increase our legal capacity. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about growing the number of reliable and trustworthy and affordable legal services that our communities have access to. One strategy to do that is to increase the number of BIA-recognized agencies and accredited representatives that we have across the state of California. And also increase the knowledge of those legal services staff already. There's a lot of our legal service staff across the state that work for nonprofits, but they're used to doing really simple, cookie cutter type cases and usually refer out harder cases to attorneys. Well, with such a huge volume, we're going to have to train our legal staff to take a little bit more complex cases because in some places there just might not be anyone to refer them to. What we call nascent capacity or partnering organization capacity is increasing the number of agencies that serve as resources to our immigrant communities, such as libraries, unions, local government can play a role, schools. I know that one great example of schools taking initiative in LA, the LA school district created a process for their students to go request school records from their administration. That it was a form they filled out, it was streamlined, and I wish all schools would implement that. Because at the time when DACA was being implemented, I was in Oregon, and my biggest issue was with schools. Dealing with school administrators not wanting to give me school records, or maybe they didn't have the staff required to go get the school records in the back room on the box, all these different issues that came out. So encourage agencies to think about how they'll be affected once these programs are implemented. We are using what we call community navigator strategy. We really stole this idea from the great work that's being done in the health field. the promotores or promotoras de salud. It's using those people that are actually affected or those people that are interact with the community and training them on Immigration 101 so that they can help the community with the process as much as possible, without delving into the legal advice. We always, so we're doing these across the nation along with other national partners, and we really see it complementing the top-down model because we think you need a grassroots strategy to go along with it. And then one other thing is I'm always encouraging organizations that haven't thought themselves as legal service providers to explore that route. If you're the only game in town in a very rural organization and you have the capacity to do so, I would highly encourage an organization in that scenario to consider providing immigration legal services. We're going to have a lot of challenges that we already know have been in the past. There's a lot of hard-to-reach populations. One of them is going to be our Asian community. 14% of the undocumented population is Asian, and knowing that we know there's a variety of languages within the Asian community, a variety of communities. The Asian community, unlike the Latino community, doesn't have such an open and friendly environment into being undocumented. So they challenge with, they're hearing messages from their own media talking down to immigrants, talking down about immigration and being undocumented. So it makes them less willing to come open and tell anyone that they're undocumented or that they're in this situation. For us, farm workers are very important. 1 in 6 individuals that will benefit from these programs are going to be farm workers or directly related to farm workers. So really thinking about, having our materials cover those main indigenous languages and have more visuals than lengthy, wordy presentations like the one I'm using today. And we know that DAPA is going to bring out, older populations. Something that we know from DACA is that we were able to use technology to an extent because it was your dreamer type, younger folks that were used to using technology, but we need to be creative when thinking about DAPA. So just to summarize some of the challenges, we want to prepare for low application rates, particularly from the Asian community. We're trying to figure out ways to combat that. Cost is going to be a challenge. I don't know if there's going to be a solution for that, but we should continue to strategize to see how we can make it more cost effective or can try to find ways to at least reduce the legal service cost, access to resources, like I said, compiling and gathering evidence. Many times individuals have all the eligibility criteria, but they just can't simply prove it because maybe, they just don't go out, or everything is under their husband name, or 5, 6 people live under the same household and nothing's under their name. So we anticipate these issues. And then geographic barriers. Some people just won't be able to access resources as easily. So what can our partners do? There's many things from a huge spectrum. They can be reliable sources of information. They can refer immigrants to local service providers. They can actually have their staff be trained in answering simple questions and just dispelling misinformation. They can help. A library, for example, could put together a workshop or an event where people bring in documents and librarians just help them compile them or organize them without saying that's going to be enough. It's more of just organizing it so that they're ready, or helping them figure out what they might be missing. There's a lot of great DACA work that Miko will talk about, and naturalization work that individuals can be engaged in. And maybe once they delve into what's happening now, they'll consider doing something in the future once DAPA starts. And then once again, I probably sound like a broken record, but I would ask partners to consider if they can provide legal services through their non-attorney staff. So there's some great potential partnerships. This year, obviously, there's the election, so there's a big push for citizenship. to get our immigrant community civically engaged and just go out to the polls and vote. There's currently over 9 million immigrants across the country that are eligible to become citizens today, but there's many challenges and obstacles for them to getting that. But there's a huge need for both information and services. We're very grateful for the recent funding that was distributed from the state through the Department of Social Services for immigration services. We're one of the many grantees that currently is using that funding to provide free immigration services when it comes to DACA and naturalization. So there's a lot of great partnerships for any of you in the room to think about. There's a lot of these great agencies that have this funding to provide immigration services. How could we partner up with them? And then lastly, one of my main roles at the United Farm Workers Foundation is leading a national network of farm worker serving organizations. We call it the Si Se Puede network. And it's really to provide a national infrastructure to maximize our collective impact. If you do get the slides, we put up some immigration resources. Highly recommend this first website called adminrelief.org. It's meant for people like you. It's not really meant for the community, but on this website you'll find sample presentations, toolkits, one-pagers on what's going on, most up-to-date immigration information on there. We're hoping to put more videos that could be used to maybe put up on community spaces. There's also a readycalifornia.org page. On this page, you'll find a lot of the local events that our Ready California partners are putting on in providing immigration legal services. And then lastly, sisepuede.org if you want to find out, if you want to refer the community to a Spanish-speaking, a Spanish website on immigration, I would highly recommend our website. And then USCIS stands for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They're the branch that will actually be implementing these programs or are implementing DACA and citizenship. So they're essentially the source for everything that I shared with you. So if you want to see materials from the source, that's the place to go. Want to wrap it up with that, and then I'm going to hand it over to Miko Osada. She's with the El Cajon Library in San Diego County. And one quick story I wanted to share with you all. We were lucky enough to participate in focus groups. So we had community members. A foundation was able to get community members into a focus group to talk about, different issues that affect them. But one of the questions that were asked in these focus groups are, who do you trust in your communities? Who would you get information from and, not really question it? And again and again, we heard libraries. The community does trust libraries. The community sees libraries as a reliable source. So I'm really happy to be doing this presentation with the libraries, and hand it over to Mika to share with us what the libraries are doing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miko Osada, and I'm from the San Diego County Library. I'm the Youth Services Librarian there. And today I'm here to talk about library programs that we've organized and can organize in the future for undocumented community and immigrants in general. So the question was, why at the library? Luis addressed this a little bit, but so we have at the library, sorry, let me start again. I'm sorry, drawing a blank. The library, unlike its nonprofit organization partners, has physical locations already all across the state. And every time nonprofit partners organize a legal workshop, they have to spend hundreds of dollars on booking a venue. And we can provide this for free. And also, like Luis said, we have a fairly unusual position of being a trusted resource for undocumented residents. And we are planning a collaboration for libraries, other government departments, and nonprofit organizations so we can have a team-based approach on addressing immigrant issues. Of course, we didn't do this on our own. We have found a lot of partners As Greg said, I got a $5,000 grant to develop a professional workshop development series for undocumented youth and young adults in San Diego County. And we found a great number of people who could help us. First, nonprofit organizations, other county departments, the San Diego County Credit Union, so banks could help us too, and of course, schools and colleges. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about why personally I got invested in this issue. In the middle here is Nancy, and she is a longtime library regular who has been at my library a long time. She was a teen volunteer, and a few years after knowing her, I found out that she was undocumented. And I helped her through the first DACA process when she went through in 2012. And watching her struggle to access the resources that I take for granted every day was what was the inspiration for this project. So what kind of needs do people like Nancy have, and how can we address those needs at the library? I found that Nancy, first, she just didn't know where to start. So we offered an overview of legal, kind of like Luis just did for you, but the legal background, what DACA is, what the different terms are, what to watch out for. And we had an informational presentation with a partner, a community partner called San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium. And we hosted them at a couple different libraries. Next, so Nancy got her DACA card first in 2012, but they also expire every 2 years. In 2014, she had to renew her card again. So for the first wave DACA applicants, we offered a DACA renewal legal workshop where they could get assistance step by step with pro bono lawyers, filling out the application, even supplying the mailing supplies. So all they had to do was go to the post office and drop it off. So after they got DACA, I saw them struggle with steps that they had never had options to before. So now they had a social security number, but where do you go for your social security card? Where do you get health care now that you have those options? What is a credit card? How does it work? How do you get a bank account? So we had a presentation about the next steps that they could take and how to navigate them. So if we think back to college and applying for college, it was very difficult to apply for us, and also thinking about financial aid and how complicated the FAFSA was. Now that process is doubly complicated for an undocumented student because they have completely different rules and applications. So we had a Dreamer College Fair and financial aid presentation specifically set up for them. And we had standing room only the first year, and it's now an annual event. It was the first college fair for undocumented students in San Diego County that we know of. And of course, this was a very cost-effective program because all the partners were free. Now, they just got their employment authorization card, but how do you get a job? This is a really complicated process even for those who have had citizenship, have had social security numbers. And they've also, until this point, not considered that as an option, so they haven't had the practice. So we had a Millennial Job Workshop. It was open to everybody, but we did target our promotion to attendees from previous workshops. And we had volunteers from other county departments, HR departments, who gave one-on-one help for resume writing, interview practice, career counseling, and that's Nancy on the right there. And we also had a Dress for Success event at the same time where we collected business, casual, and business clothes and gave them away for that event. So as we did these programs, we found that there were much more needs. And we found new needs as we went along. For example, in November 2014, President Obama announced DACA and DAPA. And so we arranged an emergency session in January 2015 for an information session again. And we were hoping for 50 and ended up getting 150. so we had to move it really quick to the children's area. And then in January 2015, the undocumented residents could get driver's licenses. So we arranged a Spanish language DMV review class so that they would have a way to study. And that began in March and goes on every month. That's just what our library system has been doing, although we have much more planned in the future. And other advocates from more library systems have done a lot of things also. Now libraries are providing, we have a long history of helping immigrant communities. And so, for example, we have ESL classes, we have citizenship instruction, we have literacy resources that I personally benefited as a child growing up with recent immigrant parents. But now libraries are providing DACA Workshop and resource fairs like we did across the country. We have Fresno Library set up dedicated spaces for immigrant integration information. They're called Citizenship Corners. Azusa City Library, they are creating a 10-week in-depth curriculum for civic integration. And at least 4 library systems across the country are approving staff members to get BIA accredited so they can practice some form of immigration law legally in the libraries, and they're able to give legal advice. Does anyone have any questions? My contact information is right up there.
So tell us a little bit about the program that helped people come to the library and get the materials together, the documentation that they needed for DACA.
The documentation that the application workshop. So the application workshop is organized by our partner who have a lot of experience doing this already in other venues. But it is organized by station. The first station is check-in, and then they get ushered into an orientation where they get a general overview. Then they go to form prep, and trained volunteers help them fill out the application step by step because paperwork is so difficult, especially if you don't speak very much English. And then once that's done, this is the most crucial part, a lawyer has to look over the application to make sure that everything is kosher and looks good. And then they check out, they make copies at the library for both to send in and then for the applicant to keep. And then after that, they're finished.
Right, and so how long does that take? You come to the library with this stuff and go to the 3 different stations.
Yes. It takes about a couple hours. I think we had 27 applicants the year we did it, and it took about from 9 until 2:30-ish. And also, before this step-by-step legal workshops, we've also broken off the document preparation into separate sessions so that they can come, they sign up for the overview session and get information on what they need. Then they get help gathering their documents at another session. So that preparation process has already begun.
The other thing I remember, and Luis, you said this too, when I first heard you speak, like a lot of it is it's the outreach. It's the outreach, right? It's getting the people there to participate in the program, right? Like you can't just send out a blast email and expect everyone who speaks Zapoteca, right, to show up at the library and have it. Can you speak to that a little bit? But it's really, it's like everyone making the effort to go out and get people to come to the trusted institution, yeah?
Yes, so libraries are not considered a traditional place to get immigration help. So if we had just put up flyers in a library like we do for other programs like Storytime, then nobody would have come. But so you have to really go out, especially to churches, nonprofits who have already been doing the work. We tried health clinics. And so you really had to get out there and try different creative ways of getting to different sources to get the information out. Because if you just, sat and did what the usual stuff, you couldn't get any attendees. And that was the big difference for me as a youth librarian. Usually I'm used to staying more in the branch to do my programs, but I had to get out of it to reach the target population. Yes?
Most libraries have a youth librarian. Is that something that most have?
I would say most libraries do have a youth services librarian. The smallest branches probably don't, but they have library staff that can fill this role also. And almost all libraries have a story time. They have to have some kind of programming as a requirement. Yes?
Do you know how many successful applicants you have helped since you started the program in San Diego?
The DACA Renewal Application Workshop that we did in November had 27 successful applicants. And then I'm not sure how many came to the last one. So this grant project was from 2014 to 2015. And we repeated a lot of the programs this last year also. We just expanded to another branch in North County. I'm in South County. And I know that they had 97 attendees at their information workshop that just took place a couple weeks ago. So I can only imagine that this reach will get wider and wider.
So the question was to speak a little bit more about the community navigator curriculum that we're launching across the U.S. actually. So the idea here, like I mentioned previously, is we just don't have enough BIA accredited reps and attorneys to do all the work. And myself as a BIA accredited rep, when I'm doing a case, I would love it if they came with like a folder for each year of evidence and like, this is in dreamland. But you do have some individuals that come like that. And then you have the spectrum of like, I had an individual that I was helping that came literally with a chest, like a big chest of all the papers you can imagine that they've collected in over a decade. And I was like, well, if we're gonna play a game, you're gonna go over to that corner and organize your stuff. Because I just can't be, using my time when I can help someone help you gather and collect and organize your documents. So there's little things like that that a lot of non-attorneys can help with and help hold people's hands and be a little bit more informed of what's going on. So we have, we call them modules. Essentially, they're like different trainings. So we cover topic. We'll start off with an immigration 101. So not only will I cover stuff that I covered today, but we'll talk about what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean? Who are these immigration branches? Like, what are all these immigration terms? And we'll have a little discussion about that just so that everyone's on the same page. We'll talk about unlawful practice of law that's always covered. Like, great, we're gonna empower you to help your communities, but hold off, you can't do everything. So we really talk about the barriers of what they're allowed and not allowed to do. But the idea here is to amplify our outreach, right? There's only so many Mikos in the world, so we need more people like Miko out in the community, spreading the word, being connected, knowing what's going on to increase our efforts. So we're very excited next week. We're gonna be doing one in San Diego County in conjunction with the San Diego County Library. We've invited outside partners. I know we're expecting maybe roughly around 40 individuals. Most of these individuals are leaders at nonprofits, although the training is more geared to grassroots community leaders. We see a high value in training, providing this training for individuals that do work at non-legal immigration services organizations, because many of those individuals will play a role, will interface immigrants. Immigrants will come to their office and ask for help, and they should at least know where to send them, what's going on, what to do. So that's the idea.
So if you were giving advice to a room full of state-level policymakers, where would you suggest they might begin to help us either prepare, right, to handle the kind of this administrative load, or to get out in front of it? Like what is it that, without sort of, the state imposing sort of some cookie-cutter thing for the entire state, to be reflective of, like the diversity of all these different communities? What can we do to help make your life easier?
I mean, resources are always great, right? So a great example, and one thing we're really excited about that I mentioned earlier, is the grant that's being administered by the Department of Social Services. That was an investment that our state gave of roughly $15 million. That is a great and awesome investment, but we hope that another investment like this one will continue to come. I know in the past there's been efforts to give resources to these kind of immigration services, but they've been abused. So we're hoping to turn the page and start anew and continue these efforts.
I just wanted to, I work in the past as an immigration attorney, and I'm now doing research, but I think that one of the really important things in what we both talk about in terms of the community navigators and the trusted resources is that a lot of the immigrant community already interacts with a lot of government officials. For example, the schools. Schools have Spanish language programs where they bring in Spanish-speaking parents or non-English speaking parents for, for educational purposes, but those same parents, you already have a trusted source, the school, and you have a community who has a lot of immigration needs. You could use them for multiple purposes. Or another example is social workers. Social workers often interact with the community on many different levels. So just the existing government officials who we know already interact with these communities, being able to give them more capacity to provide them with information, to know where the resources are, to direct them to good legal services, I think would be really helpful.
Are there barriers to getting the BIA accreditation?
For whom?
For someone who wants to do that in California?
So you have to be in a nonprofit as a staff or volunteer or something.
I mean, there's nothing California is doing that makes it any more difficult than it would be anywhere else in the country?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just, I guess we could facilitate that by, at a state level, by, for example, at a state library level, would be to just tell all the libraries, this is an option you have, you should, think about it. Look, the LA library is doing it, maybe you should think of, just encouraging folks, because a lot of folks don't even envision, you have to get them past that, roadblock, oh, that's not what we do, we never done that, we're not gonna do it, type roadblock. That's a lot of the challenges I encountered. There's also no sense of urgency until the programs are actually here, but then it might be too late, your doors might be coming down by then. So I'm still encouraging people, this is the time, we have time to do all these systems and processes now and training and get it out of the way so we're as ready as possible. So just thank you for your comment. I would say at a state level, if we work with, if we have the power to control agencies that interact with immigrants, I would say putting together procedures that, if your agency interacts with the immigrants and collects documentation of whatever, if you're a medical agency and you can expedite the process of them collecting the times they went to the doctor or the times that you interacted with them, that'd be awesome. But at times it's just, in the past, that has been a big challenge for our community.
Has anything to add to that? What can we do to make your life easier? Got to use the mic.
Okay.
Tell them about your Facebook group.
We just created a Facebook group for library staff who are invested in immigration resources and creating programs at libraries. I wanted to speak to trying to reach out to school systems. In my experience with this program, I was told by nonprofit organizations to be very careful when approaching school districts because you don't know who is leading it and how they stand politically. And we don't consider this a political issue because the mission of libraries is to provide quality information, and that includes all legal information. But because immigration is just such a touchy subject, we were told to be very cautious. And we have made contact with some schools and some teachers, but we haven't had much luck approaching a whole district as for partnership or outreach. But as far as making my life easier goes, or making this easier, I think one of the greatest challenges was the politicalness of this issue. It was difficult to navigate and make sure that I wasn't offending somebody that might shut this whole project down. And I think one of the greatest things that we could do is if we had a statewide initiative, including libraries, including nonprofits, including other government departments, and if we had a whole initiative that had all the gravitas of the California government behind it, then I can just say, oh, I'm not just one librarian that thinks this is a great idea. This is a statewide initiative. This is a legitimate thing, and I can bring that more easily to someone like a school board member.